Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Section 1.
Welcome
Kyle,
back,
our
everyone.
first show for the new year,
First show,
2021.
2021, new year, new beginnings.
New
starts.
beginnings. Yeah, we're about to pivot.
We're about to pivot.
Right. So let's start. So we're gonna start the new show. But before we get into the topics, Kyle, this week our the Honorable Prime Minister was taken into hospital. There were multiple reports. He was taken into hospital. I saw some updates in terms of he'd been in good spirits.
Yeah.
Things like that. But I want to wish, all of us from Section 1, Kyle, myself,
Station, I'm
the
sure.
station, Jagrati. We want to wish Dr. Rowley, our Prime Minister, a speedy recovery. We hope that
want you back in the fight as soon as possible.
Yeah, as soon as possible. And I want to see you back in Parliament soon.
Yeah, and as we're on that point, we don't want to get too political, but I couldn't help but notice a lot of very, very poor comments coming out about
To say the least.
To say the least, and I put it as mild as that. Very, very poor comments about people, from people in relation to the Prime Minister's health. And I just want to categorically condemn and distance myself from those types of comments.
Yeah.
When someone is ill, someone is ill. Nobody criticizes you about your health.
Yeah.
Health is something that you sometimes you cannot control, and especially a heart issue, a cardiac issue. I mean, yes, diet and exercise, all those things, but let's not become a society where we revel and take joy in the demise, the demise of our perceived opponents' health. I mean, regardless of what side of the political divide you fall, there is absolutely nothing to celebrate in our Prime Minister being ill. He's our Prime Minister. He is the duly elected leader of our country at this point, and we need him back doing his job.
Yeah, correct.
Right?
I mean, as Kyle said, I know we spoke about it, and Larry as well, when we spoke about it around meetings, and some of the comments we had on our Zoom meeting, and it was quite, I'll use the word distasteful because I want to be very careful what I say, but it was very distasteful to see some of those comments coming in. I mean, Dr. Rowley has been a politician. He has represented the country for a number of years.
Yeah, he's been a public servant for
And he's
many
been
years,
a public servant. I
regardless
mean,
of
show
what you
respect, right? Show the respect to the man and to the office of the Prime Minister.
Exactly, regardless of what you think of his policies, there's a time and place to deal with his policies. That is in Parliament, that is for elections. You have a problem, go and deal with it there.
Yeah.
But you don't use someone's ill health to score cheap political points. And I want to distance myself from
we
any
all
comment like that.
would like to.
I was happy to see very quickly, I think it was Mr. Rambali was the first one that I saw put out a comment.
Then Mr. Indar
Then
Singh.
Mr. Indar Singh, and then I saw the leader of the opposition, obviously would have had a more official statement on it. And I was very pleased to see that a lot of opposition members came out immediately. Not looking to score any cheap political points.
And wish him well.
I wish him well. I can't say the same for other commentators on the political sphere, but so be it.
So be it.
Stefan, we are advocates of free speech here, and everyone is entitled to their free speech. Even if you choose to use your free speech in a very reckless way, it's up to you, I suppose.
Now, speaking about free speech,
right,
let's move to the situation in the U.S. Right? We all know, we have commented on it. We have
by U.S. you mean the United States of America.
Well, not us.
The greatest democratic, the great democratic nation.
The great democratic nation.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say something there, but I realized I was on
Western
live television. I mean, the what people perceive as the democratic state in the Western Hemisphere, right? What we saw happening in this week, if you thought that 2020 was bad, the first 6 days of 2021 was a shock because we saw, for want of a better term, Vikings on Speaker Nancy Pelosi's desk.
You saw the storming of the Capitol building.
Yeah, the Capitol building. Where I mean, I remember I saw George Bush. So George Bush put out a statement. He said it's only things like that happen in a banana republic. Yeah. And it showed because what happened was President Trump made some very reckless statements on Twitter saying be free, go strong, things like that. I'm paraphrasing. But go strong, be strong. And what was happening at the Capitol building was the Senate had convened to count the electoral votes. What happened was the Vice President Pence, he has a role in it as per their constitution, and he was sitting overseeing it. What Trump seemed to do was he tried to put pressure on Mr. Pence, his vice president, to cancel the entire thing. And Mr. Pence said, no,
No.
And what happened after was a storming of the Capitol building.
Well,
I have never seen it in my lifetime. I hope I never see something like that again.
You see, Mr. Pence is consummate political insider. I mean, regardless of his political views.
He's a politician.
Trump is considered really a political outsider, meaning that he was not brought up in the Senate. He was not brought up in standard political circles. And what you have, and I remember reading a book where the commentators essentially said that when you have these populist leaders coming into the political system, so you had like Chavez, you had like Ortega, you have several other populist leaders that have risen to power because they have said things to incite and inflame popular political passions, and people end up bringing them into office. But they are not truly of the political class. They have not been nurtured in, and they don't understand democratic norms and values. And someone like Pence, regardless of whether he would lose politically or lose popularity amongst his base or his perceived base, etc.,
the Republicans,
he would essentially stand as a guardrail to ensure that the situation didn't get worse, that it didn't descend into anarchy. But what I take out of this is that this is why it is so important that we discuss democracy, democratic values, and democratic norms, because we see how even in one of the strongest democracies in the world, you had almost a crumbling of that democratic edifice, that democratic structure. It almost fell apart. And the entire society could have fallen into anarchy. And that is really why, as citizens, we must take our democratic norms, principles, values. We must fight for our democracy. We must preserve democratic values.
Discussions like these always has the what occurs when we have these discussions is we always have that knowledge, and the knowledge has to be gained from the population itself, and things like this will not happen, ought not to happen.
Ought not to.
And hopefully those stemming from this show as well, it could have that talk and discussion between everyone, so that look, when elections come around, we don't have that inflamed situation where something like that could ever happen.
Well, you see, very interestingly, and I remember reading a commentator on it. There is the view that, within democracy are the seeds of its own destruction. Because you could very well make an argument that a lot of what happened in the Capitol on that day was pursuant to people's right to demonstrate, right to march. Just earlier last year, you had with the BLM movement a lot of riots, a lot of protesting, a lot of very strong protests that led to violence and that sort of thing. And not that the originators necessarily associated that, but what you had in a lot of instances was a breakdown of law and order. You have obviously comparisons with that to what happened there, and I think that the two are different, are somewhat different, especially what the fight is for. But nevertheless, people have a right to protest, right to demonstrate. Does that right allow you to storm into a Capitol building? I would say obviously not. Obviously not. You're not entitled to effect a change or an influence of government by force, and I think that is actually where you get the insurrection part of this. So let's not mistake your democratic right to protest and your freedom of expression with what took place there. You could have a freedom of expression to say, I think that the American people made a poor choice, or I have no confidence in the electoral system, or I disagree with the mail-in ballot system. And that is fine. There's nothing wrong there. But if you go to the point where you come out and say, we need to not accept these results and ensure that the legitimate process does not take place, and I want my supporters to go in and stop the process physically, then that is inciting violence. That is not freedom of speech, and people need to understand. And I think unfortunately, what gets caught up in this is that laws are passed which tend to now derogate and take away from rights.
That's the point.
Because people aren't really understanding, or people fail to appreciate what precisely is the boundaries between freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and inciting violence and insurrection in this case.
And that's what Mike Pence essentially said. He said, look, my role is not to be subservient to you, Mr. Trump. My role is to defend the Constitution. And some people may say he didn't do so because he and Mr. Trump supposed to be aligned together, but in his view, he did. Yeah. And he defended the Constitution and he continued the vote. And very soon, I think it's January the 20th,
yeah,
it will be the Mr. Joe Biden will be sworn.
Yeah. I suppose it's, I don't want to sound too controversial, but I suppose it's a lesson. What are you loyal to? Are you loyal to the president? Or are you loyal to your society? Are you loyal to your political organization?
Yep.
Where does your loyalty really lie? And in Mr. Pence's case, he was loyal to the Constitution and to the Democratic Republic in which they exist, the United States of America. He was loyal to the Union, as they say.
He wasn't loyal to any person.
He wasn't loyal to any person.
He made that very clear, and that is admirable.
And that is commendable. Again, regardless of his views, and I have followed some of Mr. Pence's views.
Yeah.
Conservative right-wing views, some of which I agree, a lot of which I disagree.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, regardless of his views, at the end of the day, when the time came, history will record that he did the right thing.
Yeah.
And he stood on the side of democracy and the side of Constitution.
Yeah. Moving along, we had a little movement in the procurement aspect of things in Trinidad and Tobago, moving back to Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
And importantly, while we were off on the 4th of January, Mr. James Chankett, the deputy chairman of the board of the procurement regulation, he resigned.
Yeah.
What he cited was, he said it was the new amendments that we discussed on the show previously, was the final emasculation of the act.
Yeah,
I think he couldn't take it anymore. He resigned.
We went through, I think we had Mr. Afra Raymond on. We spoke about it. That the word I think the opposition has used is that the bill has been gutted to some extent. I agree to some extent with that.
Yeah.
Whether it goes as far as emasculation, some people would have to make up their own minds. Ultimately, I think half a bill.
So Mr. Chankett is not a political person.
He's
right?
not. No, he has no political identity per se.
Per se.
Right, and you have to take a sense of pride and comfort in the fact that at least there are citizens out there who may be put in positions but are willing to stand up for their views and beliefs. And his view and belief is not a radical one.
No.
It's one that I think a lot of society, and I think if you actually polled most of society, they would obviously want a stronger, firmer procurement bill, because I think society has reached a stage, our country has reached a stage where we want accountability in the way contracts are awarded, in the way state contracts are awarded.
Transparency in those instances are very important to us now because of our past. And we want to ensure that our tax-paying dollars are properly spent. And that was the whole uproar really into the quote-unquote gutting of the
well, to rub salt in the wound, you had, I think just yesterday, the ferry, the new ferry sailing into our waters as this was taking place. And that ferry was one of the issues that was raised. How was the ferry procured? How did we go about that? Did we get the best money did we get best value for our dollar?
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Well, I suppose
let's see how well the
But regardless if we did, I think there's something to be said about process.
Correct.
Even if just because you have the right end result,
it could be the best boat in the world.
It could be the best boat in the world, but for the best price.
But however, then that should lend those in power to ensure that the transparency and that process is there.
And you hit the nail on the head there. It's about transparency in the process.
Correct.
It must not only be fair, but it must appear to be fair. Right? It must appear to have done the right way. People must have confidence in the process, or else you're going to sow doubt, you're going to sow seeds of doubt, and people are not going to be satisfied with it, and you're always going to have this sense of resentment from society that we hate politicians, that we hate the politics, that we hate those in charge, the government, because we think that they're spending money, wildly.
And without any repercussions.
Without any repercussions.
And that is where, and we have to commend our society for this, because what we have done, what we as a society has done, we have grown and we have become knowledgeable. And to the extent now where we are holding our politicians accountable. And we are saying, look, if it is that we give you our taxpaying money, and we are entrusting you with it, we want to ensure that transparency is there. And well, Mr. Chankett probably thought that.
Mr. Chankett, well, clearly he has
his own views on it.
He has taken a stand.
Yeah.
He has said that he will not be a part of that. I saw that Mr. Imbert responded, I think it's in a tweet, basically said, well, you only had a few more days on the contract anyway, thanks for your service. Typical Mr. Imbert style. You know, I say that with the
greatest
of respect to Mr. Imbert. I suppose trying to imply, well, you know, you're on your way out anyway. What was your what was the point of your stand? But I think, you know, the converse to that is that even though he was almost on his way out, he decided to take that stand. He decided to take that stand, and we have to commend him for that. And we are going to have to come to a point where government ensures that systems that are in place inspire confidence from the population, and that it is sufficiently transparent that all of us could access, look at it, and be satisfied that the process of spending millions and even billions of Trinidad and Tobago dollars account, because we are going into very, well, you know, we are in economically depressed times, and that's the point. And people are losing their jobs. People have less money to buy food. People have less money to enjoy themselves, to have family time, to have use what you call disposable income and enjoy your life. People are now beginning to really feel the strain of the economic conditions. And in those circumstances, it is even worse if we see money spending that is not accountable, and that there is no real process to ensure that we have fair value for money. And that's the point.
On that
At the end of the day, that's the core. That's the real problem with this procurement.
That's what I was going to say. And just on that point very quickly, when I was reading an economic journal recently, and they said, for those of you viewing, we thought that 2020 was difficult in terms of the lockdowns and things like that, but a lot of economists have indicated through their knowledge that 2021 is even going to be worse, because we will now feel the downfalls of what occurred in COVID-19. And the viewing audience, we need to be very careful the way we spend money. We need to be careful, right? Because at the end of the day, you want to enjoy yourself, and you want to.
Well, there's a double-edged sword to that. And that's the problem. When you have a lack of confidence in the economy, the natural reaction by most citizens is that, look, we're going to pinch our pennies, we're going to be careful. But by doing that, you then slow down economic activity. You remember when there was the Depression, when America went through their hard financial time. One of the ways that they got out of it was by a stimulus package. Barack Obama essentially was able to get Senate. I think it started with George Bush, and then Barack Obama continued it. To have a stimulus package, targeted stimulus package, where you undertook a lot of construction, be able to assist people with some of their mortgages, and
so
spend
people had
money.
more disposable income.
Exactly, and by doing that, they injected into the economy money that could be spent, and it brought back economic activity. Now, that is not to say we have money that we could just inject into our economy. But you have a double-edged sword there, and the double-edged sword is that if you go into this type of conservatism and fear, you may actually end up hurting the economy more. So it's a vicious cycle, and that's why we need responsible government and responsible leadership in our economic department, in our economics at this point in time.
Having that level of transparency to inspire the confidence.
And that's the point.
Now, moving on to a topic that has been important to us, the repatriation issue. Right? We have continuously called upon the government to bring back all of our citizens home. There are still, God knows, probably thousands of nationals out there that are still wanting to come back and be repatriated back into our society. Why it came back up very boldly in the face of citizens was we had the Minister of Sport, I believe, Ms. Shamfa Cudjoe. She was granted an exemption to leave and come back for private reasons, and I stress on the word private. So because she wasn't going as a minister, she was going privately. And then we also had MP sitting on the opposition going away as well. I saw somewhere on social media that they were on the same flight. Now, I saw a senior attorney at law on social media indicate that they should hold a joint press conference.
Mr. Larry Lala.
Mr. Larry Lala. And Mr. Lala indicated that maybe they should hold a joint press conference and tell us, the citizens, how the system works. Because it lends to the frustration of all of the citizens wanting their families back. We just finished Christmas, we're into the new year, and we have people who presumably have been in the line for so long. And you have politicians who are flying in and out with exemptions, and we simply do not know what is going on. Our citizens want to come back home, and it's essentially a slap in the face.
Yeah. How do you explain to the citizen who has missed a funeral, who has missed a wedding, who has missed medical treatment, who is stranded abroad and savings are running out? How do you explain to them? It's not about wanting to punish Ms. Cudjoe or the other MP from the opposition. It's not about wanting to do that. It's not about being overly scrutinizing them. The point of it is a sense of inequity.
Yeah.
How do you explain to those citizens who are really suffering as a result of this exemption policy that you have been granted these exemptions to do certain things that they also want to do? And how do you explain, because you also had the issue with family members of politicians coming into the country and out of the country and leaving. And you have people coming forward who said, well, I had my application in well before those persons.
Yeah.
How did they get in before me? And the obvious answer, the obvious conclusion that most people come to is that a string was pulled, that there was some connection, and it is who you know. And again, that lends to this inequity in society. It is a seething discontent that people have.
Correct.
People are really upset.
Well, they're fed up. At
They're
this point
fed
in
up.
time,
do we still need this exemption policy?
Exactly.
And that's the problem.
And that's the point. And because we have people, a lot of countries have opened back up. I mean, we saw there is a new strain of COVID-19 emanated from the UK, but we see that a lot of countries have opened up, and the majority of countries have repatriated back their citizens.
Well,
and we are in a situation now where we still have people outside begging to come back, and we have politicians who are simply going in and out on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, I mean, you've essentially turned entry and exit of our borders into elitist sort of endeavor.
Yeah,
basically,
I know.
It's for the big shots.
Yeah, I know. I'm a politician, so I could easily go to. Maybe I could go to. Hypothetically speaking, I could go to my colleague. On both sides, I'm talking about both the opposition and the thing, and go to Mr. Young and say, well, Mr. Young, I want to go and see my family in Miami or New York. You know, I could get an exemption. Yeah, and the exemption is granted, and that is what is perceived by these actions, because you have people outside for 8-9 months, and we had people on the show. The two young ladies, thankfully, they came back right before Christmas, but they were outside for almost 8 months. They were outside since the beginning. And we have people who are outside since then. We have people messaging in the show and telling us that. And there is a young man, I mean, Larry could tell us, the young man who's in Guyana right now, he's homeless. He's essentially homeless.
As we were talking, I did a quick Google on exemption policy for persons in Trinidad and Tobago, and I would encourage anybody to do it. No, and the point of it is, what the ministry calls an exemption policy, in my view, is not really an exemption policy. What it is a sort of narrative as to what you have to go through. So it talks about quarantine, it talks about these, but you know what the policy is. What is the criteria for choosing Stefan coming into the country as opposed to me coming into the country?
Yeah.
That is what I want to know.
Yeah.
Is it that you have it by age? Is it you're saying that older people are allowed to? Is it that you have a medical issue? Is it that you know, I don't want to be too facetious, but is it that you have a pet that wants to come in the country?
Well, there was an issue, and Minister Young indicated very, I know, but the story has changed. He said it comes on a first-come, first-served basis.
And you see...
And then that story changed.
No, that could never be.
It could never be, obviously.
That could never be totally logical. Yes, you have to, obviously, there will be a sort of priority to persons who have applied before
There will be
others.
a queue. There will be a queue.
Yeah, but what if I need life-saving
That's the
surgery?
point.
And I only found out today, and I need to leave to get it done tomorrow.
Yeah.
Are you saying I have to line up behind?
Go last.
Obviously not. And that's the point. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the opposition leader has said that she is going to challenge it. I don't know if she meant legally or in Parliament. I'm not quite sure. But on the basis of equitable treatment, on the basis of equity, because you have some persons who are being granted the exemption, and you have some persons who are not being granted the exemption. And if I have a comparator, if I'm in the same, the way you bring a challenge in equal treatment before the law, and that's a right in the Constitution, Stefan, that everybody should be treated by the law equally, right? To simplify it. You must bring a comparator. So if I was in the UK and these are my circumstances and I wanted to come back in and I applied on a certain date and there's somebody similar to me, or very, very similar, applied on a certain date, similar position, and he was able to get in or she was able to get in well before me, then it calls upon them, it calls upon the state and the government, the ministry to justify why the policy was applied in that way and how that person got in front of me. And if you can't justify it, then in law, what we say is that the policy is arbitrary. It means that it's, how Minister Young gets up today and says...
Local parlance at Vaiki-Vai.
At Vaiki-Vai. They get up today and they say, well, look, I'm going to have XYZ,
Let me do it now.
This one,
yeah,
let's lay it out, and I'm going to choose any, mini, miny, mo, choose which application gets in. And that's the problem that we have as a society. We don't have the proper transparency of the policy, and we don't have proper procedure, and we don't have proper people making these decisions. I want to come out and just say it. There's only so much you can hide behind political, correctness, right? It is clear incompetence that's taken place in that exemption policy now. I've said it. It's clear incompetence. I can't see how you have all these inconsistencies, and it's being abused by both sides apparently, right? But I don't want to call anything. I don't want to make any accusation. But there seems to be abuse on both sides, and you really ought not to take advantage of a system because you are in a position to do it.
Because you sit in the halls of the parliament, you're allowed.
And you are now a public officer, so you can't say, well, that's my business. It's no longer your business. Time you step into the public limelight, it's no longer just your business.
Correct.
Right? It's how you conduct yourself, because we as citizens want to know what kind of person you are before we put you in charge of our business.
And that's why I stressed on both sides, on both the minister and the MP from the opposition, that they went presumably on personal.
I mean, let's just say that it's clear that we don't know because they have not said. But the problem is there's now a perception. And the perception by the public is that the ministers, the minister and the other person may have used their position to jump the queue. That's the perception. We're not saying that's the position. Right? I agree with the attorney who has come out and said, look, you may have to try and explain this. And the reason you have to explain it is because you are in public office.
That's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point. So what we will do is we're going to take a short break, and we're going to go into the forum where we're going to discuss two bills. The evidence bill, the amendments to the evidence bill, and we're going to discuss campaign finance.
I see the time. We might have to touch on the evidence bill a little bit.
We might touch on it and just go into the campaign financing. But in the deposition, so we might marry both the deposition and forum together because of the time. We spent a little time on it, and we have Mr. Bishnu Raghunath, a senior lecturer of political science at the University of the West Indies,
to talk about the
importance of campaign financing. A very dynamic guest indeed. We're gonna have him there. We're gonna be discussing that, but we want to take this time very, very quickly to remind you, the viewers, that if you want to engage with us, because we have this thing now, we want to engage with us. You could call us at the end of coming down to the end of the show at 663-2335, or it may be easier if you can't get through on a phone line to have that discussion with us, to comment on our Facebook live feed that is going on, either on the radio and TV Jagriti or on Section 1. Comment, and we will answer all of the questions that are there. So let's take a very short break, and we'll be back with the forum.